So I think we are already live on this new edition of Human Dialogues. I'm really happy to be here with you one more month to discuss something human. As you know, Human Dialogues is this in-depth interview that we organize from the Institute of Humanology with some expert from around the world to discuss human topics. Every month, we choose the topic and we work on that topic, offering you different events, different activities that have to do with the topic, like our monthly human conversations, where we have 3 experts in a panel discussing the topic. Well, we had our panel this month, and before the month ends, we also want to offer you our human conversations. Our guest today is an incredible woman. You're going to love her. I know it, because she is incredible. Not only is she as a coaching psychologist, and she will explain what that means when we're interviewing her, but she is also the creator of the Brain Boss Method and member, look at this, she's a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. She's been practicing coaching for 25 years, and she helps people in many different fields in their lives. And one of them is the topic that we're going to be addressing with her today, among others, which is the true power of leadership. All the way from Dubai, if I'm not mistaken, I am really thrilled, really happy to welcome Silke Glaab. Silke, welcome. How are you?
I'm very, very fine. Thank you very much, Jessica, for inviting me on your show and this lovely introduction. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm really thrilled that you are here. I really am, because you see, when we talk about leadership, one of the first things that comes to mind is usually, very serious businessmen in their suits. And it's fantastic to have a woman representing the topic of leadership to begin with. So I'm very happy to have you here representing this topic. Silke, before we get into the topic of leadership, why don't we first get our audience to know you a little bit? I said, in Dubai, but you're not from Dubai, are you?
No, I'm originally from Germany, but I also stayed in Kenya before. I worked in Kenya, and I'm in Dubai since 11 years. So quite some time already away from Germany.
Yeah, so you are a bit like me, a citizen of the world in a sense.
Yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. And I also know that you've done a lot of volunteer work. For example, in Kenya, you were also doing volunteer work. I said at the beginning that you're a coaching psychologist. Well, psychology is quite well known. Coaching is becoming quite well known. How do you put them together? What is exactly coaching psychology, Silke?
Okay, so for my background, I really studied psychology. I hold a master's degree in psychology. And if you are more in the Anglican world, a psychologist is someone who has a PhD and is more like a clinical psychologist. And I'm not a psychotherapist, and I'm not a clinical psychologist. So what I'm offering is something that I still have my psychological background, of course, but I did a lot of courses in coaching. So I hold degrees in NLP coaching, in systemic work, in breath work. I also have certifications in hypnotherapy. So that's like people are offering hypnotherapy in a clinical setting, but also in a coaching setting. Then I also have certifications in behavior analysis. That's also like in between therapy and coaching. And therefore I said, as I'm here registered as a executive coach, and I still don't want to neglect my psychological background, and I said I'm a coaching psychologist. So I'm able, like a coach is someone who focuses on goals in the future and helps the client to reach certain steps towards his or her goals. A psychotherapist or a psychologist goes also back in the past and finds out where are some blockages. Why are you not thriving now? Because there's a lot of literature about it, that the first years in your childhood really forms your identity, yourself, core beliefs about yourself and the world, and also certain behaviors. And therefore, to make also a shift in the future is also to go back in time to find out where this belief was formed or a certain behavior was formed, and then relearn a new behavior.
I love
So
because what you're describing is basically also very similar to humanology, what we do in humanology. Humanology also includes coaching. We teach our humanologists coaching, but other tools as well as NLP. They are trained in NLP, mentoring. For example, I am also a positive psychologist. So we mix all the different tools to help the client however the client needs, because as you said, things are different and they sometimes need different things. That's extremely interesting. But how does that take you to leadership? Because you're quite the expert in leadership too. And I think leadership is like one aspect of human beings. And all those things that you know, that you mastered, that you work with, how can they lead you to leadership? What was the path that took you there?
Yeah, the path that led me there is actually my own childhood. So my parents, they run a hotel for many, many years. And until some financial issues also came there as an entrepreneur. And this was like, had a great impact on the mental health of my mother. And this was also maybe also one of the reasons in the end I decided to study psychology, and also to understand how like an outside experience, like when you're an entrepreneur and you really have worked a lot, and out of financial things, also your mental health is affected by it. And for many years, I didn't look at it. I just followed my path as a psychologist. I worked in different industries and also in different countries. And then when I started to really think about what could be the next career step for me, I thought about relationship coaching, but then I said, I'm not really a relationship coach. I'm not reflecting someone who has like a partnership and she wants to help others. But I thought I really have something deep rooted in myself, and that's actually people who are in leading positions. And in the end, they're also human beings. And for me, if I thought if I have someone who is in a leadership position, how many other people will be positively affected by it? Not only the family, but also the team. And if you're an entrepreneur, and it's a whole company that's benefiting from it. And therefore I decided to go into leadership.
What you just described immediately made me thought of a question.
Yes, please.
How important is mental health for leaders? I mean, we talk about leaders, and there's leaders in every aspect of life. We have political leaders, we have economic leaders, we have company leaders, we have family leaders. How important is mental health to be a good leader?
It's one aspect of it, because some leaders are actually coming in because they feel overwhelmed, they feel very tensed, and they feel burnout. And that's really what I would describe, that's already mental health. And mental health means that you are not able to think and make the right decisions anymore. And also your overall health is already affected by it. You're not sleeping enough. You feel constantly under stress. And that's one aspect, how people are coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also like some people then are not eating well, or people are eating too much, or alcohol also plays a role. That's the whole aspect of mental health, that already your body is also affected by it. And you're not efficient, effective as you used to be. Another aspect of people who are coming in is that they say, I really want to expand my business, but it's not working. Yeah, I have a great business plan. It can't be the finances and the economics or the marketing. It's something inside me that's blocking me. That's another group of people coming. Or someone is in a new leadership position and has not been in such a position. Maybe you also have family, and there is a work-life balance to consider in the whole thing. Or I have people who say, I was in this position for very long, but now I really want to expand somewhere else. And they still feel quite comfortable in one sense in their current position, and they don't know where their actually strengths are, what their talents are, and they lack confidence to really go into something else. So I mentioned now 4 areas people are coming in, and one aspect is the mental health issue. These are people whose body is already out of control.
As a result of it, of course.
Yeah, as a result, yes.
So the title we gave this chat today was the true power of leadership, because a lot is being spoken about with reference to leadership nowadays, and it's a bit like everyone wants to be a leader, and unless you're trying to be a leader, you're a complete failure, because everybody should try and be a leader. But can everybody be a leader? Silke, are we all human beings born to be leaders, or can we all be trained to be leaders?
That's a very interesting question, because the first aspect came, are you able to lead yourself? Can you be a follower of yourself? And if you can answer that with yes, then everybody can be a leader. With leadership, for me, I have a different view on leadership. I call it shamanic leadership.
Okay.
So a shamanic leader, if you see what shamans were in communities before, these were the ones connected to the ancestral world or to other worlds and brought the mission to the people, because people ask for guidance. So a leader can be someone who gives guidance, someone who has a vision and people trust in the vision and follow that person. Yeah, a leader is someone who has people around who follow and trust to be guided to another whatever step in the organization. And for me, that's really crucial. Are you able to lead yourself and guide yourself? And then you can also do that with others when you concentrate on these 2 aspects. And the shamanic leader does also other things. He is able, or she is able, to also heal, to see what needs to be healed in the organization. And of course, you also start with yourself again. Yeah. Are there any aspects in yourself that needs to be healed? And the second aspect of a shamanic leader is someone who can really get into the mind of another person, like to see the whole system. Yeah, not only your organization, but the whole stakeholders, the people who buy, the communities, from where you're getting the resources from. It's like systemic thinking of the whole. That's the second aspect of it. And a third aspect is, are you able to also self-actualize and create an impact not only for yourself, but also for the community around it. You call it the B values. There is from Maslow. What's his name? Kaufman. So he's a psychologist, and he really went into Maslow's diaries. And you know, Maslow is this pyramid or the hierarchy of needs. And then this Scott Kaufman, he went into the diaries and really figured out that it was never meant to be a pyramid. It was later, I think it was an economist who read Maslow and then created this pyramid. It's not meant like this. And in his late days, Maslow also said, okay, self-actualization is still ego-centered. Mm-hmm. But what about higher values? So when you are self-actualized, what can you contribute to the higher good of society and the community around it? And then these are these B values that are really driving your higher goals that comes in. And these are the three aspects of a shamanic leader. So someone who is able to heal, but has healed himself or herself. The second is like systemic thinking, to see all aspects of your organization. And the third one is what kind of impact you want to create, not only like these key points of an organization, but also B points, like how can you be and contribute to the higher good. And for me, that's a shamanic leader, and there's also some literature about it. I found this as a psychologist very interesting.
And would you say that there are, let me rephrase the question. Would you say there is a lack of good shamanic leaders in the world? Because there's this general idea that we need better leaders. What do you think?
Yeah, and especially the world is becoming more complex. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our normal way of thinking is taken over by artificial intelligence sooner or later. So, but you need still another way of thinking. Yeah, they're much better to see patterns and reproduce than us because they have a much higher capacity, cognitive capacity than us. But we also have this emotional aspect, and we can combine certain things together. And you can guide AI what you need to do. And this will be very crucial. Are you able to not to be driven or to know that your decisions are based by emotions? Yeah, we are not only rational thinkers. To be aware of that we also have this kind of aspect, a person who can also consider different aspects, the whole system of it, and then guides whatever needs to be to a higher impact. Yeah, we are still too much driven by economics. Yeah, but sooner or later, it needs a much more comprehensive form of thinking.
Yeah.
And I think the next generation or the current generation, we need more leaders like this.
So if somebody who is now young, okay, that new generation that we're talking about, wanted to become that kind of leader, what would you tell them to do? Where should they go, apart from working with you, of course? But is there something or some place or some kind of training that they could undergo to become more shamanic in their leading styles, to say it?
Not that I know. So the literature I saw is from 2010 or 2012. Yeah. And so far, I don't know any institute. I know that McKinsey and whatever in their talent and leadership developments, they're also considering like spiritual growth, this is more considering what are your goals, what are your higher goals. These are the big goals. Also considering that emotions are playing a role, how your thoughts, or how are you actually thinking, bias thinking, cognitive biases you have. But this aspect of really healing, to know, I know psychologists are doing this, to really discuss with leaders if they're in a certain situation, why do they feel triggered? Because there is an aspect of your past that's like relived again. And if you're not aware of it, you will continue doing it. Yeah. Like I had one client, she was very much reactive to people who didn't perform. So she really explained everything in detail. And then she was so disappointed that people were not able cognitively to comprehend it. Yeah. And it made her really crazy. And then we found out that she, as a young teenager, had to take over the role for her parents because her parents were not able to do finances, to do any financial decisions at home. And then she became it. And everything was put on her to decide. And she had to be much more clever than her parents. And therefore, nowadays, she is so triggered if someone behaves like, in her eyes, stupidly.
Yeah. Those are the kinds of situations we're facing, and we're realizing that it's basic to approach them. One of the things that we discuss at the Institute is that we think the world needs rehumanizing. You were talking about artificial intelligence. You also briefly mentioned the material and economic objectives of companies. And one of the things we say is that we need to rehumanize. We have to go back to knowing and understanding the human beings that we are so we can make progress. Because for centuries now, we've been looking outside. All the growth has been focused on the outside development of companies, like economic growth, mathematical growth, whatever, marketing growth. And we are defending that it's time to go back to basics, and the basics are human beings. Would you somehow then agree that that shamanic view of leadership also requires a rehumanization of leaders?
Yeah. That's exactly what you're doing. When I said it's before you heal something in your organization, it's like solving conflict in teams. It's very important that you have healed also yourself. Yeah. First of all, you may not even be aware that there is a certain conflict going on, and you oversee it. But if you have healed yourself, then you can understand human behavior much, much better, because you have understood your own. And this kind of systemic thinking, it considers even other, like more, not only we are doing it, that we have this kind of economic results, but what are we doing for our customers? Where are the resources are coming from? Who is affected? Even we have this organization in street AB, but does it affect anybody in the neighborhood too? It's a much more systemic, and bringing it together. And also this being, the being values is very much human. And Maslow was a human psychologist. There was this big movement of humanization in psychology. So it came after the behaviorists. Mm-hmm. Then there was this movement of Pearls was involved. It was also a result of the Second World War. That really put the human in the center.
Because it can't be any other way, the way we understand it in humanology, given that everything we do has to do with human beings, one way or another. So not knowing us doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and when I studied psychology, we had this part of it. It was part of organizational psychology. At that time, they discussed the human-machine interaction, but this was still industrial. But now we have now, I don't know, 30 years later, now we have the human artificial intelligence interaction.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah. So it's always the same. We as humans have actually not evolved too much. Yeah. And we are still based on our thinking that was maybe in Stone Age. One time we decided we can think. Yeah, we can solve problems with it. Yeah. But do we actually create awareness, like big insights? And therefore shamanism comes again in that maybe that's also human, yeah, so that you connect to something that's much higher that no machine could maybe figure out in that moment, yeah, and also not you with your normal thinking.
Yeah. And that links beautifully with the next question that I have for you, Silke. You lived in, no, it's because it's very much related. You lived in different countries. You trained in one country. You lived in different cultures. And leadership, of course, has a cultural bias. If you're a leader, you have cultural bias because you grew up somewhere, you learned somewhere, you're impacted by your own culture, your own environment. Would you say that shamanic leadership is good for all cultures, for everybody? Is there a difference between, one style and another style? What would you say? Yeah. What's your experience?
You're very much right. If you see different cultures, what kind of leaders they know. And on one side, you will also see that a lot of cultures always had shamans. Yeah. Someone who had another connection to something, and also they are not always followed. Yeah, but in communities where you still have tribes and so smaller communities, this kind of shamans are actually everywhere. If you go to Russia, if you go to Africa, if you go to India, in Europe, yeah, in Europe was maybe more the church. In a certain way, because the church was quite political, influential, yeah, and I think so. Mm-hmm. But in nowadays world, you also have to consider like huge countries like China and whatever. They also have their subcultures. So what we see on the political agenda, how these leaders are leading, is maybe necessary to keep all these different provinces and whatever together, but it doesn't really replicate what's going on in the sub-communities there. This is someone I heard once, they were discussing China, and then they said, okay, we all believe that this committee is so powerful, and of course, if some provinces are going totally against, they will suppress it. But in different areas of China, they have all their sub whatever going on, yeah, or also in Russia, yeah. So we think it's all about Putin, but in this different thing, there are sub cultures.
And I know I lived in Russia. Yes, I lived in Russia too. Yes. Yeah.
So I think on a certain, not on a like high level, yeah, but in these subcultures, I believe is one part. It's not every leader should be a shaman, but I think it needs more of this kind of people who can think more complex, more systemic, and who really want to have a team that's really co-creating. And therefore, you need to be really connected and relatable to the people around you.
And then, you talk about big countries like China, and that immediately makes me think of big corporations like CocaCola, maybe I shouldn't say names, but, the big corporations that are also like huge countries, but also have smaller branches in different countries. Yeah. And we have the same situation. So we could escalate it to companies, and I suppose we would find the same situation you just mentioned, right?
Yeah. I really believe that. And then sometimes there is, if you have to communicate somehow to the headquarters then you may have a cultural gap in between. But if you have more independence in certain countries, I think that's actually okay. Like certain Coca-Colas, when we already speaking about it, I think they actually taste in different countries differently. Or chewing gum. Someone gave me a chewing gum, then I said, "Oh, wow, this flavor." I said, "But this chewing gum is from the States." And she said, "Yes, it's from the States." I said, "Because I've never experienced a flavor of a chewing gum like this that lasts for so long." And she said, "Oh, I also don't want to know what's inside." I said,
They adapt. There's something, and now I live in Switzerland, and there's something funny that really surprised me the first time I saw it here, and that is that here in Switzerland, and ever since we came 10 years ago, all the bottles of Coca-Cola have on the top made in Switzerland, which is something that, you say, but Coca-Cola is the most American thing anyone could think of. And here in Switzerland, they do not drink it if it's not Swiss made. So, that's a very clear example of what you're talking about.
So I think that's really the way to go, because it's more creating this kind of communities.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then you have the human to human connection when you are operating in a kind of community.
Mm-hmm. See, we go back to that word. Leadership is somehow a synonym for community in a way. It's what you're basically saying.
And someone has like a vision, or someone can guide and has the ability that other people are following.
Yeah, because one of the things we used to see, especially in the past, but we still see among many, many leaders, is this isolated position where they are on the upper levels of the ladder, looking down at their collaborators. So that image of a leader or leadership completely clashes against what you're saying. Does this mean that type of leadership should disappear from the world?
I think you really have to consider what certain people in certain positions are doing. Yeah, if you have someone who is in a higher position and is mostly responsible for strategy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a CEO is mostly strategy and whatever. And in this case, it would be very interesting for that person if that person would think more systemically.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then if you have someone who is more like responsible for a team, then it would be more important for that person to have this relatable connection and to heal and empower and inspire people for flow and inspiration. Mm-hmm. And in both aspects, for the CEO and someone who is responsible for a team, it would be also important to have not only financial goals, but also impact goals. What a lot of companies write in their vision and mission, but make it really more specifically. Yeah, what higher goals do you really want to achieve with your enterprise?
Mm-hmm. I love it. So if I had to ask you the question, Silke, what would you say is the true power of leadership?
The true power of leadership for me is that you are able to look ahead and tell people where the whole mission could go and establish like a connection to them that they actually go with you.
Well, I love that definition. I think it's perfect. Sorry, I keep on interrupting you. No, I was just saying that I love the definition. I think it's beautiful. And I think it's something that should inspire the leaders that are watching us today or that may be watching this in the reruns later. Silke, thank you very much. I love this very brief conversation with you. I think we could speak for hours, but I think we touched on very interesting topics. And I think that they're great food for thought, not only for leaders, but also for followers. Thank you, Silke, for joining us in Human Dialogues. I hope that we can continue having you on other shows and other programs at the Institute of Humanology. It was lovely chatting with you, and I wish you the best and a fantastic evening.
Yeah, and I thank you again for your invitation, and listeners and people who are watching it. I really also thank you, and let us know what you learned from it, if you have any other questions. So thank you very much all for watching.
We will for sure. We will for sure. If we get any questions or anybody wants a follow-up, we will for sure let you know. Silke, thank you again, and continue leading all those shamanic leaders to be the best leaders they can ever be.
and it's a really cool word, yeah. So it's so many aspects.
Thank you, and to all of you watching us today or watching us in the reruns, remember that you have an appointment with us every month on Human Dialogues by the International Institute of Humanology. I'm Jessica Lockhart, and it was, like always, a great pleasure to have you here. Bye.